It was the year 490 BC. The Greeks faced an overwhelming foe at the Battle of Marathon. The Persian forces led by Darius I sought to punish Athens for its support of the Ionian revolt. Despite being outnumbered, the Athenian general Miletus devised a bold plan, and the Greek hoplites charged in battle. Against all odds, they emerged victorious, but that victory came at a cost. After the battle, a soldier named Phidippius was tasked with the urgent mission to carry news of the remarkable victory back to Athens. He ran nearly 26 miles across rugged terrain, fueled by adrenaline of triumph and the weight of his city's hopes. Upon reaching the city, he gasped, "Victory, Nikeo." But the exertion was too much, and he collapsed and died from exhaustion. This story illustrates not just the military prowess of the Greeks, but also the relentless spirit and dedication to their cities. It serves as a reminder of the lengths to which they went to protect their freedom and the legacy they left behind. And then the last stand at Thermopylae. Fast forward to 480 BC. As the Persians' threat loomed large, King Xerxes I led an enormous army into Greece, determined to conquer the city-state that had defied his father's rule. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a small contingent of Greek forces, led by King Leonidas of Sparta, prepared to make a stand against the overwhelming force. Though vastly outnumbered, the Greeks fought valiantly for 3 days, demonstrating exceptional courage and unity. On the final day, learning that they would be outflanked, Leonidas sent most of his men away, but chose to stay with his 300 Spartans and a handful of allies. They faced the Persian army with an unwavering resolve, knowing their sacrifice would inspire future generations. As they fell one by one, they proved that valor can shine brightest in the face of adversity. The story of Thermopylae became legendary, not only for the sacrifice of Leonidas and his men, but also for the inspiration it provided for the rest of Greece. The Persian advance continued, but the spirit of resistance, ignited by their bravery, would lead to eventual victories at Salamis and Plataea. Their sacrifice became a rallying cry for the Greek city-states, showcasing that unity in the face of tyranny could prevail against the mightiest foes. Hi, I'm Dr. David Santos. We're continuing our series on ancient Mediterranean history. In this lecture, we'll be looking at the Greek-Persian Wars. Others will call it the Greco-Persian Wars, more commonly referred to simply as the Persian Wars. So just a quick overview here. The Greek-Persian Wars occurred between 499 and 449 BC. It's a series of conflicts between the Persian Empire and various Greek city-states that at some points form coalitions, at others are on their own. The wars began with the Ionian Revolt, and that's really what gets the Persians into war mode. So the Greek city-states in Asia Minor, they rebel against Persian rule. So that leads to the Persian invasion of mainland Greece. The first one takes place in 490 BC. It culminates in the Battle of Marathon, and that's where the Athenians achieved victory, which frankly was a surprise to everyone. Second invasion is led by Xerxes in 480, and that has the famous battles such as Thermopylae and Salamis. Those are the two key ones, where Greek forces, including Athens and Sparta, united. They resist the Persian army, which is a vast army, and even though there were setbacks, the Greeks ultimately triumphed, and there's this decisive battle at the end of Plataea. These victories preserved Greek independence and really shapes Western civilization following that time period. So how did we get to this point? So we have that part of the world controlled by Babylon. And since we study the Bible, we believe in the Bible, we look at the book of Daniel, and we see this progression that was predicted. And the progression is from head of gold, then to the breast and arms of silver, belt and thighs of brass, then the legs of iron. So we see this as Babylon, Persia, Medo-Persians, Greece, and Rome, and this progression of these specific world empires. So how did Persia become? How do we see this transition from Babylon to Persia? So that the fall of Babylon to the Medo-Persians occurs in 539. It's this important, pivotal moment in ancient history. The Persians, under King Cyrus the Great, he leads his forces against Babylon. They take advantage of the city's complacency, internal instability. And according to these historical accounts, the Babylonians, they're caught off guard. Cyrus' army, they divert the Euphrates River, which allows them to enter under the city walls. So there'd be ports or hatches for water to be able to flow into the city. That's one of the things that made it a city that was not a city that was defeatable. So they just use these things against them. Babylon should have understood this because it was well known. Cyrus had done these kinds of things as he closed in on Babylon. So they were just not prepared. They thought they were living in Babylon and no one could get to them. So Babylon falls without any significant resistance, and it marks the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. When this takes place, there were actually people living in the city, and it was days before they even knew that there had been a regime change. So the coup had taken place, things had changed. This, of course, fulfilled prophecy in Daniel. It's the Medo-Persian Empire, symbolized by that chest of silver chest and arms of silver in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, rose to power, replacing Babylon as the dominant force in the Near East. So you've probably all read the account as described in the book of Daniel, but I just want to point out a few things here real quick. Belshazzar served as the co-regent of Babylon under his father, King Nabonidus, who ruled from 556 to 539, and Nabonidus spent extended periods away from Babylon, and Belshazzar was entrusted with ruling the city of his father's absence. Historical and archaeological records, including the Nabonidus Chronicles, confirm Belshazzar's significant administrative and military responsibilities during this time. That's important because critics of the Bible always said there's no one in ancient records that represents that we don't see Belshazzar in history, is basically what they would say. So the Bible can't be wrong. It's making up stories because they didn't actually know the history. So they're just making things up to make it sound good. They're making up their own antiquity, which they weren't. So these things get proved over time. So the capture of Babylon by the Medo-Persians under Cyrus the Great in 539 BC, it's notable because it occurred without a traditional battle. The defenses were formidable of the city, but and they have these massive walls and complex of system of gates. But according to ancient sources, including the historian Herodotus and Cyrus in the Cyrus Cylinder, the Persians diverted the river, like we said. They lower the water level and troops slip in. And that's the time period where Belshazzar's throwing a party and really blaspheming God and God's people, and the city's just taken. Now, lest you be unaware, Belshazzar, he does die. So he's murdered after that. Okay, so moving into the Persian Wars. So now we have Persia has replaced Babylon. So we have some important people to consider. Darius I, he is king of Persia who initiates the first invasion of Greece. Xerxes, he's the son of Darius. He led the second and larger invasion of Greece. Now, understand these names are going to continue to pop up. So we got to watch your ones and twos when you look at which Xerxes or Darius you're talking about. Miltiades, he's an Athenian general who led the Greek forces to victory at the Battle of Marathon. Themistocles, he is an Athenian statesman and naval strategist. And he's the guy that masterminds the Greek victory at Salamis. He also is the guy that promotes Athens building a navy. Leonidas, he's king of Sparta, and he's known for his historic stand at Thermopylae. Pausanias, he's a Spartan commander who led Greek forces at Plataea. And Meridaunus, he's a Persian general who fought in both invasions, but especially that of Plataea. All right, moving on. Key battles. You're going to see the Battle of Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis are going to be the main ones. The Artemisium, that's going to be a naval engagement. Plataea is the final land battle. And then Mycale, that's the naval victory that really destroys the Persian fleet and ended the Persian influence in that part of the world. Significance of the entire war is that the Greek victories in the Persian Wars preserved independence of the Greek city-states and safeguarded the development of Greek culture, democracy, and philosophy. The wars also demonstrate the effectiveness of Greek military tactics. So that when we look at that, it's about the hoplites and the way that they do battle. It's about naval strategy, and really it becomes a unifying element within the Greek world among city-states. That, along with the Olympic Games, really starts to get this idea of Greekness. Even though you're in different cities, you're all still Greek. So, background of the Persian Empire. It's under the rule of Darius I the Great. The Persian Empire was expanded westward. By the end of the 6th century, it had taken control of Ionia, that's modern-day Turkey, where many Greek city-states were located. Greek city-states, mainland Greece, is consisted of independent city-states like Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and others. Though divided politically, they share this cultural and religious ties. So, quick summary of the timeline. You see 499 is when things begin. Athens and Areta, they support the Ionian revolt. This is what sparks Persian anger. Athens defeats Persians at the Battle of Marathon. Areta is sacked. 480, Sparta leads the Greek defense at Thermopylae, and Athens, Corinth, and Aegina and others defeat Persia at the Battle of Salamis. So these things are going on kind of simultaneously. 479, Sparta, Athens, Corinth, and others win the Battle of Plataea, and that really becomes the end of things for the Persians. So let's look at Sparta specifically. When we look at it, we're going to look at the good and the bad of Spartan culture, based on our Christian ethics. Sparta, historical background. Sparta is known as Lacedaemon. Still not quite right. Sorry about that. This term was often used by the ancient Greeks. They specifically referred to both the region of Laconia, where the city-state was located, and the broader political entity ruled by the Spartans. So in classical literature, Homer and other authors frequently used their alternate name to describe Sparta. So the historical summary is Sparta is located in the region of Laconia in the southern Peloponnese. It was one of the most powerful and unique city-states in the ancient Greece. So their location is important. They become sort of the tip of the spear in terms of their defense. And then they always had an eye on the sea, an eye towards any place where they might need to defend against an invasion or an intruder of some kind. So they always kind of lived in fear of some sort of invasion, but that's in part due to the location. They rise to prominence in the 8th century BC, establishing a highly militarized society, becoming renowned across the ancient world. They built on principles of discipline, military prowess, and they had this rigid social and political system. So they are founded by the Dorian Greeks. Over time, they expanded by conquering neighboring territories, including Messenia. After subjugating the Messenians in the 7th century, the Spartans turned them into what they called helots. This is a class of serfs. That's a nice way of saying slaves. The helots are important because that is what made their society function. They had an underclass of serfs, and they are the ones that did all the farming, while the Spartans were left to build this military society. So by the 6th century BC, Sparta established itself as the dominant military power in Greece, and their political system is attributed to the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus. He created this unique blend of oligarchy, monarchy, and elements of democracy. 2 kings ruled Sparta simultaneously and supported by a council of elders. These are the older men, basically the guys that had managed to survive enough battles and start to get a little gray hair. They are seen as these elders. They have this democratic assembly of citizens, the Appella, and the real power was held by the small number of elite. So they reached their zenith in the 5th century BC during the Persian Wars, so this was good for them, where it played a leading role in defending Greece from the Persian invasion. Spartans under King Leonidas, they held off the Persians at Thermopylae in 480, becoming symbols of self-sacrifice and heroism. And following their victory over Persia, Sparta entered into a protracted rivalry with Athens, known as the Peloponnesian Wars, which Sparta eventually wins, at least in terms of a military victory, and they become the dominant power for a time. So Spartan dominance was relatively short-lived. In the 4th century BC, the Spartan system began to show signs of strain due to internal social and economic issues as well as external pressures. They suffered a major defeat at the hands of Thebes in 371. This leads to the collapse of its power. Over time, Sparta became a second-tier state in the Greek world. And by the time of the Roman conquest, they basically faded out, at least in terms of as being a military power. So I said the good and bad. Here comes the good. So military excellence and discipline. So they're built around the ideas of creating the most formidable warriors in the ancient world. Male citizens underwent the agoge, which is a rigorous military training program starting from age 7. So you didn't grow up at home. At 7, they plucked you away from your mother, stuck you in dormitory, and life as a soldier began. And there would be multiple stages of this as you went forward. About 12 would be the next big step. So they produced soldiers who were disciplined, physically strong, loyal to the state. The success of this system demonstrated at battles. So that's the proof is in the pudding, and they demonstrated that they could make soldiers. They produced hoplites, which were known for their exceptional coordination in battle. So by coordination, we mean coordination among one another. They use their phalanx formation. This is a tight-knit group of soldiers. They move in unison, they march in unison, they turn in unison, and they protect one another based on having this tight formation of shields. And mainly the big thing with them is the spear. So they have this complete warrior ethos that everyone recognized. They have a social unity and stability. They have this rigid social system, strong sense of duty. This helped maintain this internal unity. The government is a balance of power to help prevent major internal conflicts. And they're pretty much free of civil strife compared to other city-states like Athens. Well, I mean, not to jump the gun, unless you consider that they did have an entire subjugated group of people as slaves, but and those slaves actually outnumbered them. They have this emphasis on physical fitness and equality among men. Spartan culture, they place a strong emphasis on this physical fitness. You have to endure what they put their citizens through. But they did this for men and also women. Spartan women were encouraged to engage in physical exercise to become strong mothers who could bear healthy children. And they end up having much the same attitude about war and valor that the men do. Among Spartan men, there's a sense of equality. Matter of fact, they even refer to themselves as something like the equals, meaning we're all the same. So the role of women, Spartan women enjoyed more freedom and rights compared to their counterparts in other Greek city-states. They were allowed to own and inherit property, manage estates, and had greater autonomy in their daily lives. Their importance was tied to their role as mothers of warriors, and they were respected for their physical strength and influence in the household. Spartan women were educated and could engage in public affairs. They didn't have direct political power, though. They have this elevated status. It's notable in contrast to Athens, where women were not really included in public life. So just as a note, it's not until you become an elder that then you could live with your wife basically in your retirement elder years. All soldiers continued to live in the dormitory until that point. You might wonder, well, how do they bear children, they actually looked at it in an odd way. Having marriage relations was seen as something that should be done in the dark. You'd have to sneak home to be able to visit your wife, and if you got caught, you would be you'd be significantly punished. We'll just put it that way. So the bad of Spartan culture. I told you there's good and bad here. Yes, we are making ethical judgments. Suppression of the helots. A major flaw in Spartan society was its reliance on the helots. They're subjugated. It's a large population made up of Messenians who worked the land as serfs. They were treated brutally, forced into labor, routinely oppressed. Every year the Spartans declared war on the helots as part of their cryptia, a practice where young Spartans were encouraged to kill helots who were deemed a threat to prevent uprisings. So the helots are in constant fear of the Spartans. This need to control the helots forced Sparta to maintain a permanent state of military readiness. So I told you there was always some fear of something. This is just another thing that they were concerned about. So this rigid social structure also leads to isolationism. Sparta, highly structured society with a strict division between Spartiates, and the helots, creates a static and inflexible system. Unlike Athens, which embraced change and innovation, Sparta is highly conservative, resistant to economic political reforms. So they can't change. So they just practiced isolationism. They just separated. They avoid outside influence. They avoid outside trade. And this helped maintain their cultural identity, but it stifled their intellectual and artistic development in contrast with that of Athens. Sparta society placed the collective over the individual, but they did this to an extreme degree. And they focused on the strict military training, lack of personal freedom, limited expression of individual talents. The entirety of society is focused on one thing. They're required to live communally in these barracks until the age of 30, even after marriage. Family life was secondary to service of the state. Spartan society was economically stagnant due to its reliance on helots for ag production and its disdain for trade and economic innovation. So they had a class of free non-citizens who were engaged in trade and craftsmanship. And they have this limited role in their society, and as a Spartan elite, devalued commerce. As these wealth disparities grew, Sparta's population of full citizens declined, the city-state struggled to maintain its traditional way of life. So it's just not a sustainable way of life. Spartan culture was this double-edged sword. Yes. I missed a couple things in here that were supposed to, I thought I had slides on these, but they did, within this rigid structure, if you were a child who wasn't going to fit that system, they would turn babies out to the elements. If there was something wrong with it, just put it out to die. And they had a practice of an older soldier taking a younger soldier, usually at about the age of 12 or sometimes a little bit older. You would take someone under your wing, and they would be their mentor, but they would also be their sexual partner. So there was this continued promotion of homosexuality within their dormitories, and it'd always be this older man with a younger boy, so they are very steeped in pedophilia. So there's definitely some things that were problematic. I'll have to make sure I add those slides in the future back in the system. The way the Spartans saw this was they were creating a system where you would fight alongside with your lover, and it would make you fight harder. So they saw it in an interesting way. We would find them to be a very troublesome people, to say the least. So Spartan culture has this double-edged sword. On one hand, it produced these great unmatched warriors, strong sense of community, and one of the most stable political systems in the ancient world. However, it's built on the exploitation of the Helots, stifled individual creation, and resistance to change, not to mention the immoral, repugnant acts that they're taking on. But they had a singular focus on military dominance that allowed it to briefly rise as the preeminent power in Greece. So within the Persian Wars, I want to look at individual city-states. This is going to be super fast just to give you a flavor of what each one did. Of course, we've already looked at Sparta. They're one of the key military leaders. They bring out some of the best generals and some of the best forces. That's why they're important at the Battle of Thermopylae. That's the most famous contribution came from King Leonidas, and that's the Battle of the 300. They had about 1,000 other helpers, but we forget about those guys. At the Battle of Plataea, under the command of Spartan general, the Greek army with Sparta as its core won, and this is the decisive battle, defeating the remaining Persian forces in Greece. And it ends Xerxes' invasion into Greece, and this really establishes Greek independence. And post-war influence is they contributed significantly to Greek victory and played a major role in the Delian League. It focused on maintaining its position as the dominant land power in Greece. So Athens, they're of course key at the beginning, and the Ionian Revolt. They're important in the Battle of Marathon. Athens was the primary defender against Darius and his forces during the first invasion under the leadership of Miltiades, and the Athenians were famous for defeating the Persians at the Battle of Marathon. So the Battle of Artemisium and Salamis, Athens, led by Themistocles, played the decisive naval role in the Second Persian invasion. At Artemisium, the Athenian navy fought alongside other Greek city-states in a naval stalemate. Later at the Battle of Salamis, Athens was central to the Greek victory that crippled the Persian navy, using its fleet of triremes to defeat the larger Persian forces. And that's a huge one. And the Battle of Plataea and the Delian League formation. While the Spartans led the forces to defeat the Persians, Athens continued to provide naval support. After the war, Athens led the Delian League, which is an alliance of Greek city-states aimed at keeping Persia at bay and liberating Greek city-states under Persian rule. So Corinth, they're important at the Battle of Salamis. They had a role there in the naval engagements. And the Battle of Plataea, they provided forces at Plataea, where they fought alongside Sparta and Athens. Eretria, it's there. It's the Ionian Revolt, which kicks everything off in 499. They were sacked in 490 BC as part of Darius's first invasion, but that's what gets these things started. Thebes, they are a pro-Persian alignment. Thebes is a notable exception among the Greek city-states during the Persian Wars. It sided with Persia. They supported Xerxes during the second invasion of 480 BC, motivated by local rivalries, particularly against Athens. After the war and Persians' defeat, Thebes faced retribution from other Greek city-states, especially Athens, for its collaboration with the enemy. Argos, they have a neutral stance, remain largely neutral during the Persian War, refusing to join the coalition, probably due to a long-standing rivalry with Sparta, led to strained relations with other city-states. Aegina is important at the Battle of Salamis. The island state of Aegina contributed to significantly the naval battle of Salamis. Its fleet fought alongside Athens and other Greek allies against the Persian navy. So they have this strong naval tradition. The Thessaly initially submitted to Persia during Xerxes' invasion, opting to collaborate with invaders, but however, part of Thessaly later provided troops to the Greek forces in battles that took place later. Megara, they're important for the Battle of Salamis. They contributed ships to the Greek fleet at the Battle of Salamis. Its strategic location near the Isthmus of Corinth also made it an important ally in defending mainland Greece, and they took part in the Battle of Plataea as well. They provided land forces. Okay, another location here, Delphi, has a spiritual role. While not a city-state that contributed militarily, Delphi played an important spiritual and advisory role. The Oracle of Delphi was consulted by both sides during the Persian Wars. For example, the Athenians famously received cryptic advice from the Oracle to trust in their wooden walls, which Themistocles interpreted as their navy, leading to a strategy that secured Greek victory in Salamis. Now, I think many people, including Themistocles, understood the problems with going to Delphi and getting advice from the oracles, because they were often unreliable, vague in terms of their quote prophecies, and could quite be misleading. It's kind of like reading your horoscope in the paper. Maybe it'll be right today by accident, and maybe not tomorrow. And you can often read into these things what you really wanted. We're going to look in the next lecture, when we start looking at Athens, we're going to take a deep dive into Delphi and look at some of the archaeology surrounding that location, and it's quite an interesting study. Survey of key battles, Greco-Persian Wars, and we've looked at the Ionian Revolt. That's what starts the thing. Of course, the main thing is the failure of the revolt enraged Darius, who sought to punish Athens and Eretria for involvement. First Persian invasion, 492 to 490. Darius launched the first invasion. After the initial setbacks due to a storm that destroyed much of the fleet, Darius prepared for a direct assault on mainland Greece. 490 is the Battle of Marathon. Darius's forces landed at Marathon, just northeast of Athens. The Athenian general Miltiades led the Greek forces, who, despite being heavily outnumbered, they achieved this victory. The Persian forces retreat, and Athens emerges as the defender of Greek freedom. During the Battle of Marathon was a key engagement during the first Persian invasion between the force of Athens, aided by a small contingent from Plataea, and the invading Persian army led by Datis and Artaphernes. The battle is significant not only for its military outcome, but also for its lasting impact on the development of Western Civ, as helping to preserve Greek culture and democratic system. So the conflict stemmed from Persian efforts to subjugate Greek city-states, partly in retaliation for Athens supporting the Ionian revolt against Persian rule, and King Darius sought to expand his empire and punish Athens. So really, this revolt leads Darius to go, let's take some more land and gain some more wealth. Persian fleet first attacked the city of Aridia, which was destroyed, and then moved on to Marathon. The Athenians, led by Miltiades, was a former Persian military leader, familiar with Persian tactics, along with 10 generals, responded to the Persian landing by marching their army, composed of about 9,000 to 10,000 hoplites. Go to Marathon. The Athenians were soon joined by a small force of about 1,000 soldiers from Plataea that were loyal to our loyal Athenian ally. Spartans were requested to assist, but they were delayed due to religious observances. So this leaves Athens and Plataea to face Persians alone. Again, you would think this would be the moment Sparta was waiting for. So the Persian force estimated around 25,000 soldiers, possibly 1,000 cavalry. They outnumber the Greeks. The Persian army was made up largely of archers and lightly armored troops, whereas the Greek hoplites wore this heavy armor, wielded large shields and spears. So they have the advantage in terms of technology, while the Persians have the advantage in numbers. So the battle, after a tense stalemate lasting several days, during which neither side attacked, Miltiades made the bold decision to take the offensive. He convinced the other Athens generals to engage the Persians before they could launch an attack on Athens itself. The Greek battle line was unique for the time. Instead of deploying uniformly across the battlefield, Miltiades, he weakened the center of the Greek lines while strengthening the wings. This tactic was aimed at enveloping the Persians and neutralizing the numeric advantage. On the day of the battle, the Athenians advanced rapidly, closing the distance between the two armies, and before the Persian archers could inflict significant damage as the Greek forces engaged in hand-to-hand combat, the stronger Greek wings enveloped the Persian flanks, pushing them inward towards the center. The weaker Greek center initially gave way, but held long enough for the wings to encircle the Persian forces. So the Persian troops, caught off guard by the sudden attack and the ferocity of the Greek hoplites, began to collapse. They were driven back into their ships, and many were killed as they attempted to flee. The Greeks captured 7 Persian ships that remained, and the remainder of the Persian force escaped by sea. So the aftermath, the Greek victory at Marathon was a significant psychological and strategic blow to the Persian Empire. It marked the first time that a major Persian invasion force had been decisively defeated on land, while the Persians would return under Xerxes I. A decade later, the victory at Marathon gave the Greeks confidence that they could successfully resist the mighty Persians. The battle is considered a watershed moment for Athens. It places Athens in a new place among other Greek city-states. And then, of course, we have the legend of the marathon runner as well, the 26 miles to take word back to town. Casualty and losses. Greek casualties were remarkably light. While the Persian losses are estimated to have been in the thousands, with some sources placing the Persians dead around 6,400. Strategic impact. The Battle of Marathon did not end the Persian Wars, but it delayed Persian plans for conquest, and that delay was really important. This gave the Greeks time to prepare for what they knew was coming, including the development of naval forces. Battle of Marathon stands as one of the most important engagement in ancient history. Shows the effectiveness of Greek hoplites and what they could accomplish if they were had good strategy. So we have this interwar period, and it's the rise of Xerxes. Darius I died in 486. His son Xerxes takes the throne. He spends the next decade preparing a massive second invasion. And meanwhile, in Athens, under the leadership of Themistocles, began the building of a powerful navy in anticipation of future Persian attacks. So Xerxes is Ahasuerus from the Book of Esther. Even though the Book of Esther doesn't really delve into the Persian Wars at all, the events of the book begin with a banquet in the third year of Ahasuerus' reign, possibly held to drum up support for his military expansion efforts. Ahasuerus has one obvious character trait. He is impulsive. This manifests itself in, most notable, in the concern for honor. The banquet, whereas its potential political benefit is aimed at demonstrating the great wealth at his disposal, his attempt to parade his queen Vashti before his guests in order to make known to the people and to the princes her beauty was similarly designed to bring him honor. Such impulsiveness fits well with the character of Herodotus' Xerxes, who had the Hellespont whipped, branded, and cursed after a storm destroyed part of his fleet. Xerxes' invasion, Aeschylus wrote about it, was a Greek playwright of Athens who fought against the invasion of the Persians at Salamis. In 472 BC, he wrote the prize-winning play The Persians, one of 90 plays that documented the triumph of the Greek nationalistic spirit. The play is about Xerxes I, son of Darius, who warred against Athens to avenge his father's defeat by the Greeks at Marathon, who himself returns to Persia, defeated. Xerxes' campaign against Greece took place between the disposal of Vashti in the third year of his reign and his marriage to Esther in the fourth, 4 years later. Okay, so you've seen some of this. We're just going to continue through. We're working through the second Persian invasion, 480 to 479 BC. And in 480, Xerxes leads this massive Persian army, some say over 200,000 strong, across Hellespont into Greece. and they're also supported by this vast fleet. So the Battle of Thermopylae is the one that comes to mind first. And we've mentioned this. We're going to add a few details as we go that you haven't seen. So it's of course one of the most famous last stands in history. This Greek force led by Leonidas and the Spartans of 300, they hold off the Persians at this pass, Thermopylae, and the Greeks were ultimately overwhelmed, but their resistance delays the Persians, and it becomes this symbolic, heroic sacrifice. It leads to the Battle of Artemisium. So while Thermopylae was being fought, there's this naval battle that takes place at Artemisium. So the Greek fleet, commanded by Themistocles, you remember him, Themistocles, he's the one that argued that we have to have a fleet, and there's a number of reasons. We need this sea power, but in addition to needing the sea power, if I need to, I'll jump on these boats and I'll go somewhere else, and Greece can be in another place because we are Greek, so we don't need this piece of land. We can reestablish somewhere else if we have to. So that's why they go ahead, they build the fleet, and of course it leads to this Battle of Artemisium, and then as well as other battles. So they fought the Persian navy, and it comes to a stalemate, but Persia withdraws. So there's also the sack of Athens at this time period. After Thermopylae, Xerxes' forces marched south, capturing burning Athens, which had been evacuated by its citizens. The Battle of Salamis, the same year, is this reversal of fortune, so to speak. Themistocles leads his fleet. They come against the Persian fleet, and they get them into this narrow strait of Salamis. And at that point, they have the advantage, which leads to a decisive defeat of Xerxes' larger fleet. And it's this victory that, when they achieve it, it's the turning point against the Persian forces. And Xerxes has to retreat, and they go behind a smaller force, and that's the beginning of the end for the Persians in this second invasion. So at Thermopylae, the engagements of the Greco-Persian Wars, it's known for that dramatic stand. Part of the background here is that after the decisive Persian defeat at the Battle of Marathon in 490, King Darius sought revenge against the Greeks, prepared this invasion, but after his death, it's Xerxes that takes over, continues this campaign, and like we said, the figures range between 150,000 and 300,000 soldiers. And the Persian strategy aimed at subjugating all of Greece. As part of this campaign, Xerxes decided to invade through this narrow pass. And like we said in the previous slide, this narrow pass is what allowed the triremes, the way that the Greeks built them, they were more maneuverable and able to overtake the Persian fleet in this narrow pass. The coalition at Thermopylae, he's led by Leonidas of Sparta. He commanded a force of about 7,000 men. This included the 3,000 elite Spartan warriors, the 300. They're the ones that known and get the most recognition. But There's also Thespians and Thebians and others. The Greeks knew that they could not win a conventional battle against the larger Persian forces, so they aimed to delay the advance of Xerxes' armies and protect the Greek city-states, which, as was mentioned, didn't really protect Athens. Thermopylae means hot gates. It's this narrow coastal pass that served as the perfect defensive position for the Greeks. The geography of the area, it has these cliffs and narrow paths, meant that the larger Persian forces would be funneled into a confined space. So this mitigates through numerical advantage because they're packed in. You only have to fight so many of them at a time. They can't naturally outflank you. And remember, that's how the Greeks had been dealing with the Persian forces in greater numbers as well, is they found ways to outflank and surround these armies with larger numbers. When you do that, you only have to engage a small portion on the outside of these surrounded forces. So in open ground, the Greeks would fan out. They would weaken the center portion and the outer portion of the flanks. They would strengthen those so the force would come right down the center, and the Greeks would just fold around them. So these Greek forces fortified their positions, and they prepared for the Persians. So the battle itself began, like we said, in 480. Xerxes was confident in his forces. He launches this frontal assault against the Greeks. The Persian army, which included infantry, archers, cavalry, they're initially met with fierce resistance. The Spartans, led by Leonidas, fought within this unparalleled courage. And we have lots of records about this. And they use this phalanx formation to create a wall of shields and spears. So in order to come at this direct frontal attack, you have to find ways to get through those long spears. So it's for 2 days that the Greeks successfully held off the Persian advance. Persian troops suffered significant losses, many being killed in the narrow pass. Xerxes is frustrated by the inability to take out these Greek defenses and ordered his men to attack repeatedly over and over and over, but the Greek forces repelled these assaults. Now remember, the Greeks in Thermopylae, they get an opportunity to rest. So because you could move new soldiers to the front and rotate others back, so you had this continual rotation, where the Persians didn't do that. Remember what we said about Xerxes. What do we know about Xerxes? He's impatient, and he makes bad decisions when he's under pressure. So on the third day of the battle, there's this turning point, and there's a Greek trader that informs Xerxes about a secret path that would allow the Persians to get to the Greek flank. So this path led around the mountains and allowed the Persians to bypass the Greek defenses. So things may have been very different had that not happened. The last stand, of course, upon learning that they were about to be outflanked, Leonidas dismissed most of the Greek forces, this allowing them to retreat to safety, and he and his 300 Spartans stay. They have about 700 Thespians and 400 from Thebes. They stay. And they make that final stand. Leonidas knew that there would be a sacrifice being made here. So that's the rallying cry of the Greeks. So this last stand of Leonidas and his men is marked by fierce hand-to-hand combat. You don't have as many troops now. You can't spell the troops. You can't rotate them. And you only have 300 that are these trained Spartans that know how to fight in the phalanx formation. So things begin to break down very quickly. They fight valiantly against these overwhelming numbers. but the Persian forces were ultimately over. Eventually, they're able to break down the defenses, and the remaining defenders are killed. And the Persian army, they still end up losing having significant losses, and they eventually captured the pass. But it was a costly victory. So the aftermath and significance. So despite the loss at Thermopylae, the battle had a profound impact on the Greek morale and unity. News of Leonidas' sacrifice inspires the Greeks in their continued battle, and soon after, the Greek navy is able to achieve these additional victories, especially at that Battle of Salamis. And that cripples the Persian fleets. So, we've had some repetition here. We're just trying to overlap these things. So the legacy is that the Battle of Thermopylae has become a symbol of courage and sacrifice in the face of overwhelming odds. This becomes a story passed down through generations by the Greeks, whether they're from Sparta or Athens or wherever they may be, because courage is one of those virtues that the Greeks, all Greeks of this time period, valued. So they use these stories, and we're going to see those stories continue on later, especially when we move into Athens. Then we move into the next phase, which is Alexander the Great, moving into the Hellenistic period after that. So it highlights the importance of unity among the Greek city-states and the enduring spirit of resistance and against opposition. Their testimony to their bravery of a small force standing firm against a much larger force. So the Battle of Salamis, that's the decisive naval engagement during the Second Persian invasion. It followed the Persian victory at the Battle of Thermopylae and marked a turning point in the conflict between the Greek city-states and the Persian Empire. So it's after the Persian victory at Thermopylae, Xerxes aimed to consolidate his control over Greece by seizing the Athenian city-state. Remember, Xerxes is upset at Athens specifically for their role in the previous revolt against the Persians. So he wants revenge against them. That's what causes much of this. So Xerxes' forces advanced south, capturing Athens. That's when it was sacked, which already been evacuated, fortunately, and that was part of the delay process. And this brings in the navy in the Battle of Salamis. So the Greek forces, primarily composed of Athenian ships and allied contingents, were under the command of Themistocles, an Athenian statesman and general, and he'd been this vocal advocate for a strong naval fleet, as we've mentioned. So when he comes to this, they have about 1,200 ships compared to the Greek fleet, Persian fleet anyways, which consists of approximately 350 ships. So about a 4-to-1 ratio, and they see this disadvantage. That's why Themistocles is considered a genius within the realm of naval battle at this time period. So he devises this plan to lure the Persian fleet into this narrow strait. And like we've mentioned, that's what's able to bring about their victory. Xerxes' fleet was composed of ships from various regions, and that include Phoenicians and Egyptians, Ionian, Greeks. So they're confident that because they have such a numeric advantage, they should be able to win easily. But that's why they get drawn into this circumstance, which was much more advantageous to the Greeks over the Persians. So when they enter the strait, they find themselves in these cramped spaces with ships that can't deal with these cramped spaces. Greek ships, primarily triremes, they're faster, more maneuverable, and that allows them to engage in this hit and run tactic against this larger Persian fleet. Actually, it's a larger Persian fleet, but the vessels themselves specifically are these larger vessels. So the Greek fleet, it's well coordinated, and they executed Themistocles' strategy effectively. The Persian navy, constrained by the narrow waters, they struggled to deploy their full force and suffered from poor communication and organization. As the Greeks attacked, they concentrated their effort on the flanks, attempting to break the Persian lines. So, much like we see even at the Battle of Thermopylae, how the Greek phalanx managed to hold back this horde of Persian invaders, the sea battle uses their maneuverability and uses the conditions against the larger Persian army, who had a larger, slower force with larger, slower ships. So, key moments: the initial engagement, the Greek forces launched surprise attack against the Persian flanks. Those are the edges or sides rather than straight down the middle. And they focus on these vulnerable ships and isolating sections of the fleet. There are losses of Persian ships as chaos erupted in the Persian ranks. Many of these ships were sunk or captured. The Greeks employed ramming tactics, where they would strike enemy ships with the reinforced prow of their triremes, causing significant damage. So again, Xerxes' frustration here is Xerxes watched from the shore and was reportedly enraged by the disarray of his fleet. He attempted to rally his commanders, but the battle quickly turned into a rout. So when an army is routed, that means that they're just trying to get out of town. They know they're beat and they're taken off. So as the battle progressed, Persian ships became disorganized, and it led to further losses. So many Persian sailors, they just jump overboard in a panic, and this leads to the battle just turning into a chaotic retreat by the Persians. So the aftermath of the Battle of Salamis it resulted in a decisive Greek victory. The estimates suggest that the Persian fleet lost about 300 ships, and the Greek losses were significantly lower. So the victory boosted Greek morale and unity, and this again showcases the effectiveness of their naval tactics and the leadership of Themistocles. So following the battle, Xerxes realized the failure of his naval campaign, retreats to Asia Minor, leaving a portion of his army in Greece under the command of Mardonidas, and he's supposed to continue the campaign. The Greeks are now emboldened by their victory at Salamis. They rally, leading to the eventual Greek triumph at the Battle of Plataea in 479, and that ends the Persian invasion. So this has a psychological impact for the Greeks and against the Persians. There's now a shift in naval power to the Greeks, specifically Athenians, and this will eventually have an effect of a long-term change in how the Greek world interacts and who their leaders become. Salamis elevated Athens as a leading naval power in Greece, and leading to the establishment of the Delian League, which is a coalition of Greek city-states, and they're aimed at defending against further Persian aggressions. Longer-term legacy of the Battle of Salamis remains a symbol of courage, tactical ingenuity, and the successful defense of freedom against tyranny. It has been commemorated in literature and art, and its themes of sacrifice and unity continue to resonate in Western cultural memory, even today. The victory plays this crucial role in shaping the course of Greek history, setting the stage for the golden age of Athens and flourishing of democracy and culture in the years to come. That final phase is the Battle of Plataea. The decisive land battle of the war took place at Plataea. The Greek forces, led by the Spartans, were able to annihilate the Persian army, and the victory effectively ended the Persian threat to Greece. So, same day of Plataea, there's also a Greek fleet. They win another important victory near Ionia, and they end up destroying much of the remaining Persian navy. And this sparks revolts, and it's among the Ionian cities against Persian control. Aftermath in the Delian League. So although the main invasions were over, the Greeks continued to fight the Persians in the decades following the war. In 478, Athens forms the Delian League. It's a coalition of these Greek city-states, and their aim is to liberate the Ionian cities by defeating the Persian aggressors. It's led by Athens and conducted naval campaigns against Persians, and they pushed the Persians out of many parts of the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. So the wars officially ended with the signing of this peace treaty, which concluded hostilities between the Persian Empire and Greek city-states. These Greek victories in Persian wars preserved independence of the Greek city-states, safeguarded the development of Greek culture, democracy, and philosophy, and allows those things to continue to develop for generations to come. And that will conclude our lecture. We just want to tell you the one story before we conclude, and that's the story of Themistocles' navy and how he argues that it needs to be built. Of course, you know the end of how important it becomes, but here's his account. In the heart of Athens, the air was tense. The city had just learned of Xerxes' massive force, a sea of soldiers and ships unlike anything Greece had ever faced. The Athenian leaders gathered in the agora, their faces shadowed with doubt. Whispers echoed within the marble halls of the assembly. As many feared, resistance was futile. Among them, one man stood tall, Themistocles, the son of Neocles, eyes blazing with conviction. Themistocles' voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "The storm is upon you," he began, his words both grave and urgent. "Xerxes comes with a might of Asia, but Greece shall not fall because of our fear. We must rise upon the sea." The council murmured in hesitation. Themistocles, undeterred, paced before them, his mind as sharp as any weapon forged for battle. Athens is built not only her land, but her ships. The Persians march towards us on land, but their fate is sealed by the sea. We must build a navy, a great fleet to stand against their hordes, or Athens will fall. One elder scoffed, "Our wealth is not infinite. To pour silver into ships is madness. When we need to defend our walls." Themistocles turned, his voice rising like the waves he spoke of. "You are wrong. It is not the waves that we will win, but behind the walls. The Persian army is too great to face on land, but the sea is our domain. Build the ships, and I promise you Athens will not only survive, but she will lead all of Greece to victory." Still, doubt lingered in the eyes of his fellow Athenians. It was then that Themistocles, always the strategist, made his bold move. "If you refuse, if Athens will not take up the triremes that can save her, then I will take those who stand with me. We will take the ships, the wood of your forests, the silver of your land, and we will build a new Greece, one that will rise from the ashes of your failure." Gasps rippled through the room. To defy Athens, to leave behind the sacred city, was unthinkable. Yet in that moment, the men saw what Themistocles saw: destiny on the waves, not just a defense of their city, but a vision of something greater. "You can choose fear, or you can choose glory," Themistocles finished, his voice lowering to a calm certainty. "The Persians will come, and when they do, they will find us not cowering behind stones, but standing together on the sea, with the gods of the winds and the waves at our side." The room fell silent. One by one, the men nodded, their hesitation fading like mist before the morning sun. Athens would build a navy, and with it, they would challenge an empire. Themistocles had won the day, and as history would soon show, he had won far more than just Athens. He had secured the fate of Greece itself.